In the fall of 2012, we took a AAA trip to Spain and Portugal. Once again, I will pre-apologize for all my mispronunciations in these videos. Much like Cordoba, there was a little rain and it was a cloudy day here. But right off the bat, I will say that if you get a chance of any place to go to in Spain, Toledo has to be one of them, even before Madrid and Granada. This place is absolutely magical. It has everything. This is one of those places that isn't just amazing while you are in it, but as you are driving up to it and as you are driving away from it. Since it's up on a hill, the views of what has been built here and why it was built here become extremely obvious. Toledo is Spain's historical and cultural heart. It's the former Spanish capital and still the religious seat of the nation. It is known as the City of Three Cultures due to the influence of its successive Islamic, Hebrew, and Christian occupants, not necessarily in that order. There are many monuments in the old city of all the different cultures. It's also known as the Imperial City for having been the main venue of the court of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. It was also the former home of the painter El Greco. As you walk through its many gates, you can walk into a narrow alleyway or a wide open meeting plaza. Toledo is also world famous for manufacturing of swords. More than 2,000 years ago, Iberian blacksmiths already forged Toledo swords known as falcadas, which had an iron blade inside and a special design made to increase the bluntness of the slash. Due to their fame, these swords were made here for Hannibal's army. And as he was defeating the Romans with these swords, the Romans eventually decided they were going to start using these swords. After the fall of Rome, it was conquered by the Alans, if I'm saying that correctly, then the Visigoths, who ruled from Toledo until the Moors conquered the Iberian Peninsula in the early years of the 8th century. Parts of the walls of Toledo are of Visigoth origin, although most are Moorish or Christian. Until the Spanish Inquisition in 1485, Jews and Muslims lived side by side in the city. Today in the historic center, basements, passages, wells, baths, and ancient water pipes are preserved that since Roman times have been used in the city. By the late Middle Ages, there were at least 11 synagogues in the city of Toledo. By that time, the Jews had been in Toledo for over 1,000 years, arriving with Roman forces after Rome conquered the peninsula. Jews were persecuted by Christians during the 4th century, but when the Muslim rule was established in 711, the legal and economic status of Jews improved. Often well integrated into the governments and economics of the city, many Jews spoke Arabic and wore the same clothes as their Muslim neighbors. Maybe we of the 21st century could learn a few things. Although Spain once had a large Jewish population, most were expelled in 1492 due to the Alhambra decree, leading to a significant decline in Jewish presence. However, in recent years, the Jewish population in Spain has increased. There were so many synagogues in the medieval city that there were two synagogues standing only a few blocks apart in the old Jewish quarter. Both synagogues displayed a style inspired by the Islamic buildings that actually surrounded them. This same style was used by Muslims, Christians, and Jewish patrons and builders living in parts of Spain formerly governed by the Muslims. The earlier Muslim builders had themselves borrowed from the cultures that preceded their arrival by including details that had been popular with Romans and other Christians in Spain, such as reused columns, Corinthian capitals, and horseshoe arches. As you walk around the city, you could see why it's called the City of Three Cultures. Although from the pictures, it looks like Toledo is just a big labyrinth of narrow alleyways, and it seems like it would be very easy to get lost. Well, guess what? It is. But somehow, maybe by design, you always seem to come out to a familiar place or some plaza, so it's really easier to find your way around this city than you would think. Before the standardization of modern plumbing, there were two ways to get water for one's daily needs. The first one was the Tagus River, which runs next to the city, and the second, there were water wells and water reservoirs that were built inside the city plazas and individual houses. Although today the people of Toledo get their water from faucets, the wells and water reservoirs still exist, almost forgotten in the corners and basements of older houses. A hidden indication that one can actually still see in the streets of the city are the small stone balls or bolas in the outside corners of buildings. A family would put this small stone ball in the corner of their house so that their neighbors would know in case of a fire that they had a well or water reservoir inside. Although I'm sure that seems extremely neighborly, I'm sure it was also they would rather the fire got put out before it got to their place. Also, at times one can find the places that had or still have a communal well by looking at the names of the streets. Every street that has a pozzo in it had a water well. The Banos del Angel or Banos del Zid, if I'm saying this correctly, are Islamic baths located in the city. There are around 8 of them that are still within the historic quarter of the city. We've been to Toledo twice and stayed in town twice, and we still didn't get to see half of what's here. This is one of those places you want to stay a month. We think Toledo is actually more interesting than even Barcelona, Granada, and Madrid. The primordial Cathedral of Santa Maria, also known as the Toledo Cathedral, has a clock in the facade in the form of a portal called the Porta del Raggio, or Portal of the Clock. Again, pronunciation. If you see a building facade in the old town with two-headed eagles, it is most likely depicting the city's coat of arms, which features a double-headed eagle, signifying the historical connection to the Holy Roman Empire and its emperors like Charles V, who granted the city this symbol. The Alcazar of Toledo is at the highest point in the city. It's on a 550-meter hill next to the Tagus River. There has been a fortress here for at least 2,000 years, but standing there now is a Renaissance building from the mid-16th century. It was originally meant as a royal residence for Charles V, but by the time it was finished, the court had actually moved from here to Madrid. So instead, they used this particular building for widowed queens. A quirk of the building is that all 4 facades are slightly different. They reflect the style in favor during different periods of the Renaissance as the palace was being built. The siege of the Alcazar was a highly symbolic nationalist victory in Toledo in the opening stages of the Spanish Civil War. The Alcazar was held by a variety of military forces in favor of the nationalist uprising. Militias of the parties in the Popular Front began their siege in July of 1936, but the siege ended on September 27th with the arrival of the Army of Africa under Francisco Franco. So for now, good night, Toledo.